Today's talk is titled National Marine Sanctuaries, America's Underwater Treasures, to be delivered by Michele Roest. Michele Roest is a marine biologist and science educator. She teaches part-time in the biology department at Cal Poly, and she works part-time for the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary out of a field office in San Simeon, which is also the Coastal Discovery Center at San Simeon Bay, located at San Simeon Cove across Highway 1 from Hearst Castle. Michele has a passion for teaching people about the natural world, both on land and in the sea. In October 2023, Michele received the John Laird Lifetime Achievement Award for Environmental Stewardship from the Central Coast State Parks Association. Michele?
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here. What a lovely service you offer here. It's really special. I'm very glad to be invited to share it with you and share my knowledge about National Marine Sanctuaries. I'm Michele Roest, and as mentioned, I work up in San Simeon. I don't know if any of you've been to the Coastal Discovery Center at San Simeon Bay, little nature center there. I work out of the office, which is adjacent to it. I'm a community liaison, which means my job is to listen to the concerns of the community and relay them back to our headquarters in Monterey and deliver information from Monterey to our community. So that's what I'm here to do today. And this is a wonderful opportunity to spend a moment thinking about the meaning of the word sanctuary. Obviously, sanctuary has different meanings in different communities. Here, we're in a sanctuary, a place of refuge, of protection, a place where people can come to rest and be rejuvenated. So it's interesting how that meaning can also be related to protecting life in the sea. National marine sanctuaries are areas where the marine environment is so special that it needs to be protected. We happen to be very fortunate to live in a beautiful area. And those of us who live here, we love going to the beach, walking along the coastline, enjoying our coastal trails. We love our beautiful spaces so much, and we're so glad that they have federal marine protection. Not something that everybody's familiar with, but it's very important. So in 1992, this section of the coastline was recognized as one of America's underwater treasures, part of the spillover from the upwelling produced by this Monterey submarine canyon 100 miles north of here, but also other submarine canyons along the coastline of Big Sur. So National Marine Sanctuaries are areas of the marine environment with special conservation, recreation, ecological, historical, cultural, archaeological, or aesthetic qualities. That's a big mouthful. But in order to qualify as one of America's underwater treasures, an area has to be recognized as many of the factors here on this list. And certainly, I think we would all agree that the coastline off of our coast meets many of these qualities. The Office of National Marine Sanctuaries, which is under NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and OAA, we are the trustee for maintaining and conserving these special places for future generations. So as a trustee, we have the responsibility, we have an obligation to protect and preserve these designated marine sanctuaries so that they can be enjoyed and so that they can continue to grow and reflect the biodiversity of the history of them. One of our first national marine sanctuaries was actually the wreck of the USS Monitor. Those of you who are historians remember the Ironside that went down in the 1870s in a storm and it was at that time lost at sea. When the wreck was discovered, it was in only 378 feet of water, and divers had the technology to go down and plunder it. But it's also a U.S. naval burial site. 17 souls lost their lives in that wreck, and it needed to be protected. It was the first National Marine Sanctuary. It's 1 square mile, and it simply protects a very important piece of America's cultural history, human history. So it doesn't have to be an environmentally special place. It can be any place under the surface of the water, both in the oceans and in the Great Lakes, that has special significance to the United States. So we balance the ability to get into these places. There are many shipwrecks in the Great Lakes region that are now protected as national marine sanctuaries, even though they're not oceanic. And those wrecks are part of our cultural heritage, but they're also great places for people who like to dive. So balancing, enjoying, and recreating and learning from these special places with protecting them from being overused or loved to death, as some of our tide pools are. So we work to create that healthy balance of appreciation. We also know that healthy oceans make for healthy economies. People like to come here, go whale watching, kayaking, surfing. They're not worried about water pollution or contamination of our ocean. So it's important to keep our ocean healthy, to keep a healthy coastal economy. And more than anything, loving and appreciating where we live. And you guys do an amazing job of that here, appreciating what we have, appreciating where we live, and developing a sense of stewardship. Not only do we entrust the federal government to protect these places, we each as individuals take on a responsibility to appreciate and look after and protect these places that we call home. This is a fairly small picture, but you can see that there are national marine sanctuaries throughout the United States coastal waters, also in the Great Lakes region, 2 in the Hawaiian island chain, and 1 off of American Samoa. And these are protected. The circles represent national marine sanctuaries. The triangles represent marine national monuments, which are really essentially protected under the same system. They just designated somewhat differently. And you can see along the coast of California, we've got first in Washington, the Olympic Coast, then the Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary, Cordell Bank, Monterey Bay, which we're a part of. We're in the southern region of the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, Channel Islands, which of course is offshore, and then in between those two is a yellow square. There's a proposed National Marine Sanctuary right here in San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties. I'm just going to touch on it briefly today, but PJ Webb, who was one of the founding proposers for that sanctuary, will be here on February 4th to give you an update on the status and the process. It's really been quite amazing to watch that process. It doesn't happen very often, and here we are. We have a front row seat watching the proposed designation of a new marine protected area off our coastline. Great. So let's zero in a little bit closer. This is the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. As you can see, it goes all the way up to San Francisco, stays outside of the harbor, and comes all the way south, all the way down to Cambria. We're so lucky. In fact, the southern boundary of the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary is on the Bluff Trail at the Fiscalini Ranch. If you go to the north end of the ranch and you start walking the Bluff Trail just a couple hundred feet down, you'll see a wheelchair bulb out with a sign, and the sign points to a rock, and that rock is the southern boundary of the Monterey Bay, the largest national marine sanctuary in the continental United States. We're very, very large sanctuary, as you can see, more than 276 miles of coastline, encompassing all of Monterey Bay, coming down from San Francisco, Half Moon Bay, Santa Cruz, the Monterey Bay, and all the way down the Big Sur coastline to where we are, the southern gateway to Big Sur. And you can see that right there at the apex of the Monterey Crescent, a deep sea canyon. That's the Monterey Submarine Canyon, one of the deepest parts of planet Earth. And it comes right off of Moss Landing. If you've ever been to that area, gone to Phil's Fish Market or the Whole Enchilada for lunch, that is where the submarine canyon begins. So you can see the widest part of the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary is to encompass and protect the maximum of that canyon. But there are also some submarine canyons south of there. You can see them off the coast of Big Sur. And we also have, it was the recovery area for the California sea otter, the southern sea otter. And also it encompasses Point Piedras Blancas, several shipwrecks that wrecked around Point Piedras Blancas. It includes the elephant seal colony, which was just getting started, hadn't even quite gotten started in 1992 when this area was designated, and all the way down to our neighborhood, our neck of the woods. Very exciting. It's something I'm very proud and pleased to represent. So what makes our sanctuary so special? I know for some people naming is a problem. You know, Monterey Bay, they're so far north, 90 miles from here. Why couldn't they name it the Cambria National Marine Sanctuary? And naming is indeed a challenge. And that's why, of course, it's named for a geological landmark, the Monterey Submarine Canyon. We don't have something quite that exciting here in Cambria. So what is so special about it? Let's have a look. We have diverse habitats. As some of you may have heard, some of the kelp forests in Northern California went through a decline recently. They're starting to recover. So the next time you go out and you look at the kelp forests right off our coastline, be glad for those. They're not a given. They could be affected by pollution or by a disease. So we're lucky that we have these kelp forests here, and they enhance the biodiversity, the fish species that come there and spend the summer. They breed and produce offspring. Even in the winter now, when these big winter storms are breaking up those kelp forests and bringing them to shore. When you're walking along the beach now, you see these big, what's called a kelp rack. Well, the kelp flies love that. They feed on that old kelp. They reproduce and they produce millions of flies, which are fed upon by the migrating shorebirds who come here in droves. This weekend, of course, the Morro Bay Winter Bird Festival. This is an amazing place for birding. It's considered a globally important birding hotspot. So just really a remarkable abundance, in part thanks to the sanctuary. We also have coastal upwelling, and as the name suggests, this is when water comes up from the deep and it hits the coastline and it starts to cycle around. Deep sea canyons allow that water, when it comes up, it brings nutrients with it and spills over the edges of the canyon. So we have upwelling both from the canyons as well as coming up off of the continental shelf, which brings nutrients and cold water. That's what serves the entire ecosystem, the whole food web, starting with microscopic phytoplankton, the plants of the sea, sucking up carbon and producing 50% of the oxygen that we breathe on Earth. The other half, of course, being plants on land. But the protists, the phytoplankton of the sea, do their share to provide us with healthy oxygen. They, in turn, are eaten by zooplankton, tiny microscopic animals, which are eaten by the little fish, and then the bigger fish, and all the way up to the marine mammals and the whales. We're so lucky to live in such an abundant place. In the summertime, late summer, we see the humpback whales feeding on the midwater fishes, the anchovies and the sardines. The gray whales migrate along this coastline down. They're having their calves right now in Baja California. Then in March through May, we see the cow-calf, the mother-young pairs traveling north along our coastline. We're so fortunate to have this abundance. It doesn't happen everywhere. We are a migratory center for many migratory species. I don't know if you can see, but all the way from New Zealand, sooty shearwaters, they're a seabird that travel through here. You see them clustering off the coast in August. There's so many of them, millions and millions of birds spiraling offshore. They almost look like flies. They're so tiny, but that just means how far they are. And there's millions of them, again, feeding here as they fatten up before their big trip to New Zealand, where they have their nesting areas. Also, leatherback sea turtles born in Indonesia. They follow the jellyfish. It's hard to believe the largest turtle in the world, getting up to 7 feet long, feeds on exclusively jellyfish. And where do jellyfish congregate? Along the coast of California in the summertime, where all that abundant food is available for them. So the leatherbacks travel all the way across the Pacific and show up here in September. We're so lucky to have them. We have deep sea canyons, including the Monterey Submarine Canyon, and also we have an undersea volcano, the Davidson Seamount. And if you can tell, see the slight red boundary there, it's directly west of Cambria San Simeon. It's a huge mountain, 75 miles from shore, almost 8,000 feet high, bottoming out at 12,000 feet, more than 2 miles below the ocean surface. Just an amazing upwelling center. New species are found every time they send an expedition to explore it. We also have incredible human history. The wreck of the Montebello, the History Society here in Cambria, has a good story about an oil tanker that was torpedoed in 1941 by the Japanese during the war, and also the wreck of the USS Macon, the second to last of the naval dirigibles that went down in a storm in Big Sur in 1933. Its wreck wasn't discovered until the early 2000s. We've now done research on that wreck. And of course, historically, it's an incredible place for fishing, incredible abundance of the sea. We protect these resources using simple tools. Our resource protection is the bottommost circle there. We actually are a law enforcement agency. We have laws, and if you break those laws, you will experience the consequences. We do research and monitoring. We've sent more research expeditions to the Davidson Seamount than any other research institution in the world so that we can learn about it. We work in partnership with the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute to explore the Monterey Submarine Canyon. And education and outreach, that's me, that's what I'm here for. Not only do we want to learn about these special places, we want to share them with others. So what are the rules that aren't allowed? These things should be pretty straightforward to most of you. We don't want you to dump in a marine protected area. We don't want you to destroy the seafloor. We don't want you to disturb cultural resources like Native American sites or wrecks of important vessels. And we don't allow exploration for minerals such as oil, natural gas, and other minerals. So those are the primary rules and regulations. There's a few others along the way. For example, in the Monterey Sanctuary, they really don't want you to go chumming for white sharks, which is actually attracting white sharks by putting that what they like to eat in the water. The surfers didn't think that was a good idea, and we didn't either. So that's not allowed. We do have a visitor center. You have to come up and visit us in San Simeon at the Coastal Discovery Center. It's a great little, very small visitor center. If you have grandchildren, they will love it. So please come up and visit us sometime. We're only open Friday, Saturday, Sunday from 11 to 4, but we'd love to see you on those days. The rest of the week, we do school groups. We run lots of school groups through the Coastal Discovery Center. And I'd like to, I'm going to skip this slide and come back to it, invite you to join us as a volunteer. We have volunteers from this community, from Cal Poly, who come and visit, interact with thousands of people a year. It's not quite as difficult as the elephant seal volunteering, which is outdoors. Ours is inside. So come and check out our facility and see if it's a place where you'd like to spend some time meeting our visitors. And finally, I'd like to close with, and that, by the way, that's my contact information too. If you want to reach me, michele.roest@noaa.gov, and my phone number. And this, I believe, will be posted so that it's available for people to check into. Finally, one last word on the proposed National Marine Sanctuary. Very interesting. So you can see that the red is the proposed sanctuary, and it starts at the southern boundary. Right now, it was proposed to be started at the southern boundary of the Monterey Bay Sanctuary. So we literally would be able to straddle two sanctuaries, 1 foot in the Monterey Bay, 1 foot in the proposed Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. It's not clear if that's exactly the way it's going to go. We've had some public input that suggests lowering it down a little bit to make room for the blue triangle there, which is the proposed wind farm. And that wind farm is in process, but it's not as far along as our sanctuary program. So as our proposed sanctuary. So they have requested that we move the boundary. We had a public comment period from August 25th to October 25th, and we received over 90,000 comments. Some of them in big groups. For example, the National Audubon Society submitted a paper with 18,000 signatures in support of. A majority of those comments were in support of. So there's a very good chance that the sanctuary will be completed or designated. We're hoping to have that happen sometime in this year, 2024. But we don't know yet about the northern boundary, and also the name is confusing for many. It was proposed by the Northern Chumash Tribal Council, so not surprisingly, they named it for them. But as was mentioned earlier today, this is land that was also occupied by the Salinan tribe. And so we need to honor their request, not to override their cultural history with this name. So we're in the process of weighing all those pros and cons. It will go through our Monterey office, and then it will go to our headquarters in Silver Spring, Maryland, which will review the draft management plan and the draft environmental impact statements. And then it will go to members of Congress for final review and voting. So we'll wait to hear about that process. I know I took a little longer than I thought I would, but I appreciate your patience with me. Thank you so much, and I appreciate your time.
I'd like to open up I'd like to open up for a 5-minute Q&A for those people who would like to have some questions. Please go ahead.
Hi.
I just wanted to ask about the wind farm that's just off Cambria. And is that, do you mind sharing your feeling about that? Is that definitely going in?
Muddy.
How far out is it? And will it have any impact on?
So, good question. What is the wind farm all about, and what do we know about it so far? We don't know a lot about it. There were 3 leases that were sold in January of last year, so just a year. They're very early in the process. The agency involved is a sister agency. NOAA is not the lead agency. The Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, or BOEM, is responsible, and they are not as far along in their process as the sanctuary is. So they have asked that we create a pathway for construction. As you saw with the regulations, some of the things that would be involved in building a wind farm, an offshore facility of any kind, would be incompatible with our sanctuary regulations. So they asked for us to create a gap, and that's the proposed gap. But at this point, there's pros and cons. Another option would be for us to bring the boundary all the way up to Cambria and then to provide permits just during the construction process and essentially create an exclusion for them to be able to do their building. But they are so far away from being able to have an impact statement that it would be, at this point, they can't tell us what they're going to need. Well, Davidson Seamount is there. You can see that, and it's about halfway out to Davidson Seamount. It's an estimated between 30 and 50 miles from shore. It would not be visible, theoretically, from our coastal zone.
There are a
Yes.
couple of questions online, so when you get a chance.
I have a question. Sometimes I see on maps that there's Cambria Sanctuary that is like right along the coastline of the Monterey Sanctuary, and I've always wondered
Yeah.
what that is.
That's a great question. What is the smaller Cambria Marine Protected Area? Now, that's in state waters that goes out to 3 miles. And that's part of the Marine Life Protection Act, which was passed by voter initiative in 1999. So this is a series, a network of 124 stepping stones in state waters to protect those areas that limit. Some allow recreational fishing, but not commercial. Some are no-take zones. And those have been instituted for more than 10 years. And they're showing that those little MPAs create an abundance of fish that spill out of those MPAs and enhance fisheries and biodiversity in the coastal zone. So that's what you're seeing. That's actually a state MPA. We're a federal MPA. We go out quite a bit further.
Here's a question from Hank. Go ahead, Hank.
Hi, terrifically informative. A question that comes up regularly for some of my friends as well as myself is it's supposed to be a marine sanctuary, but you reach inland miles and miles and miles. And I keep hearing from friends who are farmers, that, you're trying to reach 20 miles inland or more. And what is the inland extent of which you have authority to impose your own additional regulations or review processes?
That's a great question. Thank you. The fact is that we know that whatever flows to the ocean is going to flow into the sanctuary. And so we have a whole water quality team that works with farmers and ranchers to ensure that the runoff from farms that may involve herbicides or fertilizer is kept to a minimum. And the program has been very successful. It's received a number of awards.
How far inland is that? Was my original question. How many miles do you allow yourself to impose your authority?
We don't have authority in fresh waterways. Our authority begins and ends at mean high tide. We work with partners,
Okay.
farmers and ranchers to voluntarily modify through education. It's part of what our education and outreach program is all about.
This question, Randy? Okay, you made a lot of remarks about the canyons and so forth. Without those canyons, would we have the marine diversity? Now, what if we just, if the canyons didn't exist, what would it look like out there?
Well, areas where there's just a flat sandy bottom seem to be less diverse than areas that have a topographical variety to them.
Yeah, why is that?
The geology affects the oceanography, affects the biology, to give you a little catchphrase that I use with my students. The geological variation, the variation of the rock and the land creates a variation in the water patterns, the currents and the air water flows. And those currents and water flows can contribute to abundant biodiversity, which supports a more diverse food web.
That's a key component to this.
Yeah, that's one of the things that makes it one of America's underwater treasures. Not every place meets the criteria for that designation. The proposed Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary looks at the incredible Chumash heritage and their relationship to the ocean and to the Channel Islands. So this is, that proposal has more to do with the cultural history, but there are also some amazing ecological treasures in the area that's been proposed.
Jeff has a question online.
Yeah, we need to move it forward, so, can we postpone that question until
Can they
after?
can people submit questions to you?
Yes, of course.
At your,
Yeah, yeah. At my email, which is right there, you're welcome to contact me. And I'm also available to meet with any of your other organizations. I'm an outreach and education specialist, so that's what I do. Happy to help.
thank you.
I'm sure Michelle can answer your question in person. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Michelle.